Hello, today is Friday, 20th of June, 2025 in the early hours. And what I want to talk about today is a misconception that I hear everywhere I'm in discussion about the nature of the war between Israel and Iran. And already that is incorrect. It is not between Israel and Iran. It is between Iran and the global American empire, which GAE, GAE, GAE. The global American empire is not a country. It is an empire. Rome used to be a republic, became an empire. The United States of America began as some colonies, turned into a country, has since transformed, particularly over the 20th century, especially World War I, World War II, into an empire. After World War II, look, if you want to strip away some narrative, the United States of America invaded Europe and it's never left. Now, of course, so did the Soviet Union, and there was a whole Cold War. But again, stripping away narrative of regime history, the United States of America, isolationist, invaded Europe. Since, there was the Cold War was a dualistic struggle between the United States of America and the Soviet Union. And it was framed, this is between capitalism and communism. And maybe it was. But it was between Washington and Moscow and everywhere else. But it was these two superpowers in a head-to-head struggle. Since the end of the Cold War, the defeat of the Soviet Union, that evil empire, said Ronald Reagan, the world has not had two overlords, two superpowers, head-to-head, proxy wars, battling over influence in Africa, the Middle East, Eurasia. Instead, we've endured what's been termed the unipolar moment. US hegemony. The US are the big dogs. They're the ones in power. Okay. Look, there are some benefits. There are some drawbacks and negatives. The Soviet Union collapsed and Russia experienced so many problems, as well as all the former socialist countries in their transition towards market economy. They all experienced serious trauma, starvation, organized crime, decentralized, criminal mafia. The transition was brutal. In fact, many problems today in Eastern Europe remain as a hysteresis, the state of the system has been permanently affected because of these events. That's besides the point. The conflict today in the Middle East, it's not between Israel, this independent state, versus Iran, this sovereign nation. It's not. It's between the global American empire and Iran, representing the Eurasian multipolar order. Right? So the hegemony, the globalist American empire, it has its present world order, and it is fighting desperately to preserve this hegemony, its regional hegemony over Iran, its power. It's an imperial doctrine. It's an imperial war. It is between the global American empire and Israel as the regime characterization of Israel is funny, right? They're our greatest ally. What does that mean? How are they our greatest ally? Well, what do you mean by this? They may not be the greatest ally of the United States of America. They are, maybe, the greatest ally of the global American empire. So this is the crux of the matter, especially when I speak to Americans. Now, not all Americans. There are many Americans in my Telegram channel, the Liberty Rising group, and our Liberty Rising chat, all one word, who know full well that their government doesn't care about them at all, that their government is an empire, that their government is evil. You know, Americans, don't be offended. This isn't unique to America, to Americans, to Washington. This is every government, right? They're psychopaths, murderers. They are the organized crime, and everything. You know, most people exist in a manufactured and highly controlled reality, fabricated. You know, some people like the Tate brothers have popularized the term. No, not even. I don't want to give them credit. They do it very well, but this was popularized with the Matrix, the movie. People exist within the government matrix. You engage with the government monopoly systems, and it goes far beyond governance. It's not law, order, protection of rights. If the government concerned itself with law, order, and the protection of rights, who would have a problem with that? But it doesn't. What does government do? It perverts. It corrupts. It is a ruling class asserting itself the divine right, or just however you wish to communicate, the right to rule over you. They say, you have given us your will, the will of the people, into our government by voting for 1, 2, 3 of our pre-selected, narrowly defined candidates whom you didn't pick the candidate, you didn't influence them, they're not serving you, they're not representing your interests. They are simply the figurehead of the ruling class, the governing elite, or a specific type of governing elite, the legislative, the government, the bureaucrat, not bureaucrat, the lawmaker, the legislator. And through this ritual, they claim we have the democratic right to rule over you, and we're above the law. In fact, we write the law. Anything we say goes. We're above criticism. I say these are general statements. You will find sometimes where scandals occur and perhaps they're taken down, but the system, right? I'm not talking. I don't. When I speak in such general terms, this is a systematic critique. So the system of democracy, I mean, it's a psychological operation, and we all know this. I often find I'm preaching to the choir, and this goes back to my point. When I speak to Americans in my Liberty Rising chat on Telegram, join, they say, we know, you, not just me. We know, we talk about this. I, specifically as the admin running the channel and making posts and documenting these events, one of my favorite subscribers, he says, look, we know you say it very well. You tell it how it is. You document it well. Believe me, you're I don't know if preaching to some Americans know, he says. Few, but at least there's that. Democracy is a psychological operation. It is what I like to call epistemic subversion. And it's totalizing. It's really quite sinister. Really quite sinister. And I wish I had a soundboard. I've got a recording of the member of parliament where my residence is technically, officially, legally registered in London, where my mother phones him and he says, "Listen," she says, "Listen, I'm reporting this incident that happened to me, that Adam Maxwell, my son was kidnapped and tortured by the government, and this," and the member of parliament says, "That sounds rather sinister." And then he does nothing about it. And then we say public inquiry, House of Commons, and he does nothing about it. So the point is, democracy really is quite sinister. It is an it is a system of epistemic subversion. It is. Let's talk about the definitions. And I appreciate that this is quite an autistic manner of analysis for some people. But I find reaching into the etymology of certain words to be highly precise and effective at dismantling their lies and illustrating the truth. Democracy, what is it? Demos, the people. Ocracy, rule of. Okay, rule of the people. Do you feel that your will is respected? Do you feel it is the rule of the land? Do you believe you have self-determination, equal protection under the law? There's a hilarious resource called The Principles of Democracy. Of course, it's written by the US government. It's hilarious, right? That's not what I understand democracy to be. I understand it as, my definition is a regime of manufactured consent. Right, and then government is a central institution or organization or central power that claims monopoly over a certain jurisdiction, and it's defined by aggressive violence. So it's not law and order. It is by definition aggressive, violent, coercive, which seems on its face to be unlawful, right? If let's take government out of the picture for the moment. How would one define law if not property rights, right? The sanctity of the person, what you make, what you produce, what you can say. Property rights and the enforcement against aggression. You're walking along, someone punches you in the face, that's aggression. Seems unlawful, criminal. So, and this is at its most reductive, what anarcho-capitalism is as an ideology. It says order, rightfulness, objective rights stems from property rights, and therefore a principle of non-aggression, the non-aggression principle. Don't harm me, don't aggress against me. And if you do, then I ought to be able to seek retribution and justice. Okay. We don't have democracy. The government lies. In fact, the government itself is a lie. This is the point I'm building up to. Epistemic. It is to do with the nature of knowledge itself. When you look out into the world, what do you see? Do you see a government that respects you, that is ruled by the people, by the will of the people, by accountable to the people? I don't. It's not a democracy. It's an oligopoly. It's a plutocracy, a kleptocracy, whatever you want to say. Let's just call it an oligopoly, perhaps a distributed oligopoly. There are many different interests. And the United States of America is an empire. So we've kind of addressed some of these basic fundamental lies. Thank you for coming along with me on this journey. 15 minutes to say, look, some of you know this, some of you don't. The world is not what it seems. I think a lot of people woke up in 2020. The world is not what it seems. This disease, this virus, it's not just not what it seems. It's not what they're telling you. That's the important thing. It's not what they're telling you. They are the government and its regime and its cathedral of power, including the media, including their media. They're dishonest, psychopathic enemies. And they lie. And they're incapable. And they lie about everything. I'd like to say they're incapable of not lying, but again, that's a systematic critique. It's not universally true. It's not fundamentally true. You know, they can say something that's true enough. Europe is in the northern hemisphere. Okay, that's not a lie. But when they say, we love you, we, the government, care about you, we are doing this for your interest, that's a lie. When they say, we are doing this, we are taking this extraordinary action, this extraordinary power, we are restricting you in some way, we're stealing money from you, we are printing money from you, we are imposing illegitimate restrictions on you, right? Not law and order, illegitimate restrictions. You can't say something, you can't read something, you can't think something. You have to stop and think, why and what is this really about? Because what they do is they shape a narrative and they impose that as reality. This is what I call fiat, or fiat epistemology. It's part of a process that that's called menticide, and we'll get into that perhaps another video. But it's a system of brainwashing. Oh, I'm not brainwashed. Everyone's brainwashed to some extent, because that is the abstract reality you are born into, raised within, cultivated within. Everyone is brainwashed to some extent. Even today, maybe I have some programming left over. I don't know. For example, I'm not the biggest fan of Iran. I've got my reasons. I listen to many things. Is that brainwashing? Like, I mean, sorry. I believe objectively there are problems with the Iranian government, right? I have many reasons. Are all of those reasons objectively grounded? I'd like to think so, but admittedly, I have biases, and some of these biases are definitely influenced by propaganda, and are therefore not necessarily excluded from what I'm defining here as some programming. So everyone has programming to some extent. It's been a fascinating journey through life, becoming hyper conscious of this around 15, 16 and years of age, and like going through life and being like, okay, either why do I think this, or especially looking around and seeing what other people think, saying, how on earth do you, I understand, because this is the environment, this was the brainwashing we were all subjected to. Movies, TV, news, articles. I mean, okay, that's one. reading mainstream media is crazy. It's there's almost a beauty in it to watch and analyze, to study how psychological acts of warfare work on the general public. And when you speak to people, I think this is the biggest one. You speak to people and they communicate some idea, make an argument that you're like, it's not correct. And you have to think, well, why do they think this? And this is what this video is about. I speak to a lot of people. I mean, not thousands of people. I speak to many people from all different walks of life, from this country, that country, this country, that country, around digital, physical, and I listen to a lot of people as well, and many people whom I respect, many people whom I don't respect, and many people whom maybe I respect in certain ways. And it's been fascinating to see a consistent error, in my opinion, a consistent error of people that say that this is Israel's war. Israel is waging war against Iran. Even thinking about it, even Israel's war against Hamas falls under this category. This is a revelation. I've considered that to be Israel's war. But thinking about it in the context of this video, it falls under the exact same thing. This is a global American empire. This is imperial doctrine. Now, it's more obvious against Iran, but of course with Israel against Hamas and the Gazan Palestinian Arabs, of course. So, is this Israel's war? Yes, it is. Of course. Of course it's Israel's war. Is it America's war? Of course. Of course it's America's war. It's not the war of Americans, ordinary people in the United States of America. And I think this is where a lot of the confusion comes from. The United States of America is not any other country. It is an empire. It is a global empire. It is the global American empire. And this war is not an Israeli war, nor is it war of American citizens. This is the isolationist or non-interventionist, or even, as Ted Cruz spoke to Tucker Carlson, a hawkish non-interventionist characterization, of which Ted Cruz is more aware of what I'm articulating here, although unable to communicate it clearly. And Tucker Carlson is on the other side, more aligned with what I perceive to be the average American understanding of the power. So this is a GAE war, GAE. Israel is not acting independently, nor is it dragging the USA into war. And this is 20 June 2025 at early morning hours European time. So far, let me just check. Yeah, so far, America has not directly struck Iran. Just checking real time. So far, nothing's happened. By the American military directly against the Iranian territorial soil. I think it's very important that to talk about this with the solemn gravity commanded. We're talking about hundreds of people dying, thousands of lives being destroyed, with the potential for millions, if not billions of lives being severely affected. And I said this about the war in Ukraine, and it's possible that this war, the GAE war against Iran, may be even larger. And again, we don't know yet. Israel is a strategic actor and partner even. It's a forward deployed asset operating under imperial directive. The common misconception is Israel started this war and America is being forced into it, dragged into it. When the truth is that this conflict has been carefully prepared by the GAE for decades. It's been documented by major think tanks, and we'll get into that, for decades, war gamed out, and supported since at least 2008, 2009. We can push it back to 2001. We can push it back to 1980, if 1979 perhaps. If there's any earlier, please let me know. You can say 1948, 1945. I welcome your comments, but I'm going to push it 1980 with the Carter Doctrine, 2001 after 9/11, the global war on terror, which was also, as you know, according to many people, the birth of the New World Order. I've heard some people push it to George Bush Sr., George Bush, and then the second George Bush, and the neoconservative agenda, whatever. This is not germane. What is important is that the current war, the conflict, represents the culmination of a strategic policy aimed against Iran, specifically aimed at regime change in Iran, to sustain American regional hegemony, to continue and perpetuate imperial dominion. And it's imperial dominion in the region, the Middle East, but not only, importantly, and very importantly, against a Eurasian multipolarity, which is the real threat to the GAE, to the unipolar American empire, the imperial dynasty, and that's taken over the world. Right? They invaded Europe during World War II. They fought with the great evil empire, the Soviet Union, for 4 or 5 decades, 50 years, for the better part of a century, and then they won. And then what did they do? They continued a policy of intervention around the world. Serbia, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, as well, all over the world, right? Latin America, Africa, Asia, all over the world. This regime doctrinally is defined by its intervention. It's pretty awful. Now, the counter to that, and I hear it by a lot of people, especially those whom have bought into the Matrix. They say, look, I maybe this is true. A lot of this sounds radical almost. It's not, right? This is just speaking truth about power. But to a lot of people, they may find it difficult to accept this. I've got friends, or former friends, who you talk to them about NATO, especially 5 years ago, and I said, look, NATO's an aggressive military war pact, so that's the extension of the US empire, particularly over Europe. And they say, no, NATO is a defensive alliance. And I say, really? What evidence do you have of that? Like, not the propaganda. What evidence do you have of that? Because I see aggression and selling American weapons to the vassal states under the GAE. Okay, so what these individuals might say is maybe that's true. Maybe there is an American dominion over our culture, politics, sovereignty, perhaps. But surely that's better than being under the control of someone else, under Moscow as an overlord. And indeed, this is the Ukrainian argument. Although, I feel like a lot of Ukrainians bought into the illusion of democracy. But if any Ukrainians are listening, and I've spoken to a few, I've got some Ukrainian refugees around. Washington, London, they're not benevolent overlords. And my personal view is, and this is where they differ largely, I think they are worse overlords than Moscow, who are evil as anything else, although not quite as evil as London and Washington, and Brussels and Berlin and Paris. Anyway, the Cathedral. No, these people say that maybe what you're saying is true, but this is the best. This is the best system we have, and I'd rather exist under American domination than someone else. And that's not an invalid or illegitimate argument. Take the Israelis, for example. Let's strip away the hot war currently, and let's look at the Khameneist position. They say, look, there's Jews in Iran. Persian Jews have been a thing for 2,500 years. We don't have a problem with Jews, we have a problem with Zionists, because they demand, through force, Jewish sovereignty. And we do not accept Jewish sovereignty. If the Zionists, if the Zionists, if the Yehudi accept Islamic supremacy and domination over them, like the Jews living in Iran do, we have no problem with them. We won't even kill you. We won't expel you out of the Middle East, out of the region. But you have to accept your dimitude, pay the jizya, and accept Islamic domination. Now, this is something that I personally, and again, I spoke at the beginning, I have my biases, I find that to be heinous. And the Iranians may point at Israel and also point at themselves in the near future and say, this system as described of Islamic theocratic domination is preferred or superior to American domination. And, again, I talk about these things. It's not like there's no legitimacy to this. Iran, Persia used to be under Anglo domination, and it sucked. There were problems. Their wealth was plundered. There were many issues. I'm not an expert in Iran, but I listen to people who have much greater expertise than me, and they tell me that there were many reasons to support the overthrow of Reza Shah. Is it the previous king? And there were a couple kings, and it sucks that they ended up eventually with the Islamic Revolution in 1979. And there are many Iranians who disagree with the Islamic Revolutionary government of Iran today, and my personal bias is that's where I side too. So, what I described so far is an objective, realist description of the systems of power. It's value-free analysis. That's not to say I am entirely objective, nor do I know everything, nor may I know everything, or everything about anything. But the power analysis, I believe, is objective and value-free. And this field of studying power, how power works. It's called, I do believe, the kind of elite theory. One of the best books on the topic I highly recommend is The Populist Delusion by Nima Parvini, the academic agent on YouTube. It is fantastic, and so is he. So now that I've given just an absolutely comprehensive, it's not quite comprehensive, it's been, I mean, hopefully really insightful, maybe slightly autistic and over the top and maybe tangential. I'm not too sure, but it's just been off the cuff. I haven't had a script for this, nor a sparring partner I usually have. But hopefully this has been so far insightful in laying the groundworks for how power works, how empire and imperial coercion, the imperial system really is, to look through or to look at reality and deconstruct it into its forensic components, and then assess and analyze. I mean, you want to do it to every component, every aspect, each element through a forensic methodology in order to determine whether or not what is being said is true. Because again, it comes down to this totalizing and imposed perception of reality, which is fiat episteme. This is a horrendous word, epistemology. Democracy is fiat epistemology. Liberal democracy. Here I'm just pulling up my script of an article that I've not published. So hopefully I'll be a bit more focused for this next few minutes. Liberal democracy presents itself as a forum for deliberation, yet its deepest function is ontological rather than procedural. It writes the template through which reality is perceived. Rule by the people is not an empirical description. It is a declaration that installs itself as an axiom. From that axiom, all subsequent judgments, legal, moral, historical, are derived and policed. The move is subtle but absolute. Ordinary propositions are contingent truths. They depend on circumstances and are open to falsification. Much like a contingent truth is, for example, this microphone exists, or it rained yesterday. And Alex O'Connor did a great video on that. I'll link it in the description. Democratic slogans, by contrast, are promoted to the rank of necessary truths. Statements considered true by definition. So 2 + 2 = 4. This necessarily is true. Or all bachelors are unmarried. If a bachelor is married, he's not a bachelor. As opposed to this microphone exists. This microphone exists because it's attached to this stand attached to the desk, and I've placed them here, and so it's contingent. It's a contingent truth. It doesn't mean it's false, but I can only tell you this microphone exists because I exist and I've placed it here, and it can be falsified. Whereas it can't be. It can be falsified by circumstances. It is not necessarily true. like 2 + 2 = 4 is necessarily true per that system of logic, of language, of ontology. So liberal democracy and the power of liberal democracy, the regime legitimacy is framed as logically self-evident. There is no external proof required, and no disproof is possible. Any contradiction is dismissed as irrational or anti-democratic by definition, threat to our democracy. And the apparatus that sustains this fiat epistemology is cultural frequently, rather than overtly coercive. So what does this word mean? Yeah, okay. Curricula that equate voting with virtue, media cycles that recite the same catechism of freedom and equality, and legal institutions that reserve the word justice for whatever aligns with the prevailing narrative as well as regime interests. Dissent is not outlawed per se, it's just rendered unthinkable by depriving language of the concepts needed to express it, as well as several other mechanisms. Thus, democracy achieves what older tyrannies could only approximate: a total cognitive occupation in which citizens police their own perception. The state no longer merely enforces law, it authors the meaning of law, freedom, and truth itself, issuing reality by decree and calling the result consent. Issuing reality by decree, that is the definition of fiat. Issue by decree, and the reality, ontology, epistemology. That is the definition of fiat, decree by authority. And my alternative definition, which I think is a better one, is abuse of authority. So, the war against Iran, is it by Israel? You would think so. It looks like Israel have struck Iran, and Israel is its own country, right? Kind of. Look, again, we talked about my biases. I believe there ought to be a state of Israel, and not everyone agrees with that. But those who don't agree with that will argue Israel only exists because of the support and permission of the United States. It is a colonial outpost in the Middle East, sustained by imperialism, by all this crap that Marxist communist academics describe it as. Postmodern. It's not. Well, a lot of what they talk about is complete crap, but what they're saying here is not completely untrue, right? There's truth to it. My fundamental hypothesis here is that the global American empire has an overriding interest in preserving its regional hegemony and blocking a multipolar Eurasian bloc, particularly Eurasian. And Tehran is the remaining center of resistance in the region after it's toppled Libya and Gaddafi, Iraq and Sudan, Libya, Iraq, Hezbollah, Lebanon, Hamas, Gaza. It's attacking the Houthi in Yemen. Syria, Assad regime in Syria. Number 7, the Islamic Revolution, or revolutionary government in Tehran in Iran. This is the 7th. I could be wrong on those 7 jurisdictions, but the imperial strategy, again going back decades, has been termed a war on 7 fronts. Whose fronts? Israel's fronts, but it's not Israel, right? Libya, was that Israel? It depends on who you ask, right? But no, it was America. Libya, was that Israel? No, America. Iraq, was that Israel? It depends on who you ask, but no, it's America. Iraq, the Gulf War. Syria, was that Israel? Officially, no, it was spontaneous. No, it was Israel, America, Turkey. Hamas, Hezbollah, yeah, that's more directly Israel. Okay. Israel provides the political and moral pretext, as well as a forward kinetic spear. But it cannot topple or coerce Iran by itself. Washington is the indispensable nation. That's the propaganda of American imperialism. All right, give me 1 second. We all know that Israel could not defeat Iran by itself. It requires America to get involved. So what people will say is Israel is parasitic. Americans think they are a country, not an empire. And some even try to argue that Jews control America monolithically. And the US is not a chaotic empire seeking to impose regional hegemony in the Middle East, but rather this is exclusively the designs of Israel dragging in the USA under parasitism. This is a reduction of power to Jews and the Zionist lobby as though they possess supernatural abilities. It's not true, right? Some people will try and say the Pentagon, Jewish. It's not. The Beltway consensus, Jewish. I don't think it is. Raytheon, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Jewish. Again, I don't think they are. Regime think tanks, Brookings Institute, the Rand Corporation, WIENP, CSIS, Jewish. Some of the directors, some of the leading figures are Jewish. For example, the Institute of the Study of War, that is Mr. Newlands. What's his name? The husband of Victoria Newlands. I forget. But it's the financial military apparatus with forward deployed bases across over 70 countries. Jewish. I don't think it is. Jews are a significant power center within the empire, but there is an entire distributed imperial apparatus. It is a distributed oligopoly, not a synagogue. So if Israel could not defeat Iran by itself, if it is an empire, however chaotic, you don't launch this war, if you are Israel, against Iran unless you are confident, if not certain, that the imperial power, the empire, is backing you. You don't do it. Because if they don't back you, you are... So you don't do it. You can't do it. And you look at the statements by America, And yeah, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, will come out with such crap as the United States is not involved militarily, only diplomatically. And you say, BS. But then Trump will say, we gave Iran 60 days to make a deal. Day 61, Israel attacked them. And we, until Israel attacks Iran. And this is where a truth of power becomes more clear. Who is in charge? Israel or America? Israel or the global American empire? And really, there are two schools of thought. So one of the best videos I've seen to date on the conflict was one done maybe the 18th. So, I like to be precise. The 17th of June, the Duran, joined by Brian Beletic, the title Trump on the Brink of Iran War. And I mean, these three analysts are fantastic. Before I watched that one, I watched the academic agent, Nima Parvini, talking about his understanding. And again, he's fantastic. His father's Iranian, and he listens to, I believe, perhaps he may spend less time listening to analysis on these things than I could be mistaken, but I know he listens to different people. There are lots of overlap. I know he listens to the Duran. I listen to many of the analysis he listens to, I'm sure, but there is differences. And one of the differences, I like Brian Beletic, but I don't watch him as regularly as perhaps I could. The academic agent says, Nima Parvini, he says, I've listened to a lot of analysts, and the two best I've determined, the ones who have been consistently validated by events, is Nick Fuentes and Brian Beletic. And he says the critical difference between these two analysts is Nick Fuentes has a Weltanschauung, a worldview that the Jews are in control. And Brian Beletic says the Jews are a powerful pillar, central pillar even. These are my words. But Brian's words, or the academic agent's paraphrasing of Brian Beletic, is that the GAE are the ones ultimately in control. And the persuasive and concise argument there is, who is currently dying? Who and where is currently being hit by Iranian missiles? It's not Americans, it's not American bases, it's Israel. No, there's lots of nuance. You can see I'm minute 55 of a 20-minute video. You can go down loads of tangents, but just reductively, that's an argument to be made. And he says, similarly, if you look at Ukraine and Russia, is Ukraine conducting American policy? To an extent, sure, but really, no. America is. How do you know who's dying? It's the Ukrainians, it's not the Americans. Okay, so I recognize this central, core, crucial, critical pillar of power, which is Jews, Jewish power. It's not necessarily monolithic, but when we look at the Zionist lobby in America, say, it's not necessarily monolithic, but there's a single issue: Israel, or what is best for Jewish people, and specifically the state of Israel. That's the Zionist lobby. And this is how lobbying works in Washington. It's not unique to Jews. This is one of the reasons why I want to say this video. I on my Telegram, I have my Telegram group welcomes anyone. You can say whatever you want, subject to the Telegram terms of service and the guidelines of the group. But there's a diversity of opinions, many of whom I disagree with, quite vehemently even. And one channel says, you know, Adam, Liberty Rising, you're talking all this crap. You're talking in long words, but it's just, you know, it's just the Jews. Just talk about the Jews, or why are you not talking about the Jews? And I say, what are you talking about? Let me just find that one moment. Right, this individual who's very intelligent, but he has a different perspective to me. He says, he says, what are you doing? Is this something intrinsic to libertarians to break ranks and start setting up a lexicon lemonade stand? I said, what are you talking about? He said, this is so cringe. You're distracting from Jewish power for no reason. And I said, what are you talking about? I am here calling out the imperial architecture that facilitates Zionist significant influence, control over American foreign policy. And this is the difference between, say, my channel philosophy and political theory and this individual. I look at power and how power is, and the architecture of power and how it's facilitated, and then you can see how the Zionist lobby and, you know, certain Jews, either individually or collectively or, you know, categorically, fit into that. Whereas he wants to seemingly elevate it to a supernatural to a supernatural level. So, and someone comments that some people like to reduce politics to a hilariously simplistic view of the world where only Jews are coherent actors and everyone else is subservient. And this is Israel or the GAE versus Iran. It is not Israel versus Iran. It's not. Are all the missiles being produced in Israel? No. You know, and this is why I'm talking about Zionism and Israel and the Jews, because it's relevant. And this is kind of what Tucker and Ted Cruz talked about in their recent interview. It's current news right now. I actually didn't think Ted did great, nor Tucker. I understand what Tucker did, and I understand where Cruz fell short. But yeah, I didn't actually appreciate the conversation overall. I don't know. I found it insightful, but anyway. It's not an Israeli war. It is an Israeli war, right? There's a war. It's involving Israel. The Israeli state is being hit. The Israeli military is shooting, but it falls under the GAE. This is not an Israeli rogue operation. It is not just Zionism gone wild. It is a GAE executing a long-standing imperial directive with Israel as a principal actor, not an independent one. The strategy has been public for decades. For example, the Brookings Institute, Which Path to Persia 2009, which states, quote, "In essence, the best way to minimize international opprobrium and maximize support for war with Iran is to strike only when there is a pretext that Iran is the aggressor. It would be far more preferable if the United States could cite an Iranian provocation as justification for the airstrikes before launching them." End quote. Now, this is the MacGuffin of Iranian nuclear weapons, which, again, there's truth to it. I talked about epistemic ontology and epistemology and ontology. The best fiction has elements of truth. Iran does have the propensity, the threshold propensity to produce nuclear weapons. Okay. And it remains a MacGuffin, a plot device, necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters, but really it's insignificant, unimportant, or irrelevant in itself. It is the catalyst for the action in the story, but it's not itself ultimately important. It matters only in the context of moving the plot forward. So the quote before from the Brookings Institute, this is not Israeli, it's the GAE. They've all gained, and and you can bring that analysis forward again and say, well, Iran is striking Israel, and now this gives justification or pretext for America to move in. Israel, our greatest ally, has requested our assistance. This is existential, whatever, right? Whatever. And the Brookings Institute, I think I need to do a whole video just on how think tanks work within the regime. But this is not a fringe paper. Right? It's central architecture for how the empire, the GAE, manufactures its casus belli. And this is not a conspiracy theory. This is what the think tanks do, is they write the policy architecture. These think tanks, they are the regime. This is how they build elite consensus and run the operations. I mean, running an empire is not easy. You have to coordinate a mass. There's multiple interlocking nodes: military, financial, technological, media, ideological, academic, religious. You've got the banks, you've got resources, oil, the military industrial complex, the vassals, all of the and Jewish power. All of these are integral parts of this larger system, the great global American empire, the cathedral of power. Simplified narratives just don't cut it. And there are common misconceptions. The system is simple. It's just bankers controlling everything. It's just Israel tricking America into war. It's just the military industrial complex seeking profits. All of these are true to an extent. Right? The bankers are controlling everything. It is a bankers' war. Israel is dragging America into the war. The military-industrial complex is seeking profits. All of these are true, but they are overly reductive and insufficiently explanatory. The cathedral is complex and is a complex and distributed network that strategically uses each pillar for its overarching imperial objectives. Simplistic explanations obscure deeper strategic intent and fail to explain long-term policy continuity and sophisticated geopolitical maneuvers. The core struggle right now, this conflict, right? It's not Israel versus Iran. It is. But it's not. The core struggle is about unipolar hegemony versus the emerging multipolar order, specifically and particularly in Eurasia, because America, the United States of America, it's surrounded by two oceans. They still have the Monroe Doctrine. South America, stay out. The Carter Doctrine, similarly, is... please let me have it to hand. Carter Doctrine. Similarly, the Carter Doctrine, yes, is US hegemony over the Middle East. 1980, Jimmy Carter. Let our position be absolutely clear. An attempt by any outside force to gain control of the Persian Gulf region will be regarded as an assault on the vital interests of the United States of America, and as such, an assault will be repelled by any means necessary, including military force. Consequently, you can see that ought the United States of America walk away from this conflict with Iran, it is walking away from this 45-year-long American project of Middle East or regional domination, which is aspects of its empire. So this war, the GAE is actively attempting to prevent a multipolar Eurasian bloc, Russia, China, Iran, India, Brazil, from consolidating, from winning power, right? Power is a zero-sum game. And this is, I guess, this is the critical distinction. Very critical distinction. Give me one moment to think about what I want to say regarding Jeffrey Sachs and the other guy, John Mearsheimer. Okay, Jeffrey Sachs is first and foremost an economist. John Mearsheimer, what is he? I mean, he's a international relations guy, as far as I'm aware. He talks about security. Now, just before I get into that, if you look at artificial intelligence, I made a post about something earlier. I can't find it. Anyway, artificial intelligence is not economic, or is not characterized by, or we don't analyze artificial intelligence in 2025 in the market under economic analysis. It's security. It's being bought, paid for by the deep state, especially for military applications, although it has dual use, dual purpose. So it is not subject to economic analysis because it's security. There's a guarantee by the state for contracts and for payment and development, etc. There is economics, there are private markets, but fundamentally it's a security issue. Jeffrey Sachs talks a lot about markets, and he is I don't want to define Sachs as a neoliberal. I don't believe he is. In fact, he talks often against neoliberalism. However, economically, I do believe economically he's a globalist. He's a staunch advocate of free trade, and I'm also an advocate of free trade, but I don't consider myself a globalist. And the reason being is that free trade enriches. Trade enriches. And the freer the trade, the freer the markets, the freer and more prosperous the people in the world. I understand why he is an advocate of free trade. So am I. By contrast, Mearsheimer, he advocates realpolitik analysis, and specifically great power politics. And he has his theories called the tragedy of great power politics. So trade and economics is not a zero-sum game. If you and I trade, trade enriches. You have this money, I have this good. We swap because you value this more than I. The value increases, and you do that enough, and you produce and you manufacture and you build and you create wealth. Great. By contrast, power is a zero-sum game. Let's take the Middle East. If there's a hegemon, then the power of any agent outside vassalage of the hegemon, or even generally, any increase in sovereignty is necessarily at the expense of the hegemonic power. Now, Iran, what is the detail about Iran is it's not within US power. So what Mearsheimer will argue is a realpolitik, a zero-sum security, and he takes it a bit too extreme. He says we should be waging war against China. I say no. No, it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the Chinese, for the Taiwanese, for the Americans. It's unwinnable, yada, yada. You can posture, you can position, you can indulge, but you don't pull the trigger. Iran is the last semi-sovereign state in the region. It has independent regional influence, it has real missile capabilities, and it has energy leverage, especially eastward towards China, Brazil, Russia, India. So this war, this GAE war, GAE, is about the empire fearing losing hegemonic status, seeking to forestall its decline through aggressive geopolitical actions. This war is not purely about regional interests, nor narrow resource control. Multipolarity is the emerging global reality, but unipolar hegemony, the GAE, remains dominant and militarily supreme. The current war is precisely a strategic response to multipolarity's rise, an attempt to reassert waning imperial dominance. Events like the Russia-Ukraine conflict and now the war with Iran reflect calculated attempts to isolate and diminish emerging multipolar threats. To summarize, this is not just Israel's war. Israel is an instrument of imperial power. It is not just about oil or bankers. These are instrumental factors, but not necessarily primary drivers. It's not just about Jewish power. Jewish influence is significant, but not singular. The global American empire is fighting multipolarity for global primacy, strategically using all available pillars of power. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my Telegram, Locals, YouTube. Thank you for listening. Let me know. This is Adam Maxwell for the Liberty Rising Group. And really, I appreciate you listening through a lot.